Hello, good evening. Welcome to this evening's session at the NPA Conference on Securing the Right Representation for Community Pharmacy in England. I believe that everyone in the sector believes that this is vitally important that we get representation right. And I think most people believe that some change is needed. The challenge is that we don't yet have a clear consensus on the way forward. There may be different views on the right structures to support the sector. I'm delighted to introduce two speakers this evening to consider this matter. We're very grateful to have Simon Dukes as the Chief Executive of PSNC, and in that role has very much encouraged the PSNC and LPCs to initiate a review of the process, initially led by Professor Wright, and now, as most of you will have seen, through the RSG or Review Steering Group. We're also very pleased tonight to have Jay Badenhorst. He's the Managing Director at Whitworth Chemist. He's a member of the NPA board and also chairs the membership committee. I'm going to invite both Simon and Jay to set up some of their initial thoughts, and then we'll move on to questions. So thank you, Simon. If I can pass to you first, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I just wanted to recap, really, and I think let's just go back slightly to September 2019, when, as you say, Nick, that we initiated this, and so PSNC, in particular me, very keen to have a review of how we represent contractors from a local and a national level. And in doing that, I wanted to see how we could find ways to spend the same amounts of money, and there's a lot of money spent here by contractors on LPCs and PSNC, how we could spend that in the best possible way, review it. If we were, then that was fine. But I think we all felt across the sector that there were better ways of doing things. And it's a really good opportunity tonight, because I've gone back to the initial paperwork and had a look at what that initial terms of reference wanted to do. And I'm not going to read it out clearly, but the things that we were aiming for as outputs from this process were to improve contractor satisfaction, stop and reduce that duplication that sometimes appears between LPCs or PSNC and LPCs, have better joint working across the piece with our key customers, have better governance and transparency, something that, how many times when I arrived in this job did you around the NPA board table talk about better transparency at PSNC, and make us more agile to commissioning, whether it's local commissioning, future commissioning, or indeed at a national level, and of course use our collective resources better. So we put together a terms of reference based on that. The LPCs were up for it. We put it out to contract, to tender, and the UEA and Professor David Wright won it, and they undertook the review. And yes, of course, there was a bit of a COVID delay, but they reported back to us in June last year, June 2020, and there were some big issues identified there. Things around value for money, duplication of effort, yes, but impact, looking at better outcomes that we could get across the board. Governance, transparency could all be improved, both at a local and a national level. So the issues were recognised and supported, and a lot of the recommendations were too. David Wright put in a huge number of recommendations into his 120 plus page report. So in late autumn last year, a review steering group was brought together from across the sector, where they're looking now at proposals. This is a group not there for decision making, but there for bringing proposals together, which ultimately will go to a contractor vote. And as things stand now, they are working with a consultancy to get a program plan together. I think the program plan is already there. They're working towards a contractor vote, and what the process will that look like. And they will be also looking at an operating model and what that looks like, both at new operating model, both at national and local level. And this is the first time, can I say, that LPC, PSNC representation has ever been reviewed in this way, has ever been looked at in this way. I would hesitate to say perhaps it's the first time that any pharmacy representative body has been reviewed in that way. And so this is groundbreaking stuff. And we're doing this for the contractor's perspective because we think we can get better outcomes for the money they pay. Next steps, a vote at the end of the year on the proposals that the RSG will come up with. But before they even do that, they will be convening with contractors up and down the country. They're convening with the NPA, with AMCCA and many others in order to make sure that those proposals have really the best chance of getting through, the best chance of being universally accepted by everyone concerned. And then I think we can start to move on, change the shape over 2022 of our representative structures so that we are ready for action in 2023 to start negotiating not just that new contractual framework, which will come about the year after, but of course also be in a better position to engage with ICSs and however they're going to be structured and however important that's going to be for local commissioning. So really important. I think we're on course. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for all of us, and I'll leave it there and wait for your questions.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's great. Really good to sort of have a recap on where we are in the journey as you see moving forward. Jay, I invite you to set some scenes and say a few words. Thanks.
Hello there. Thank you very much, Nick, and Simon. Thank you for those opening comments as well. I've noticed you've got a cup of tea there ready, so unfortunately I haven't got one already, but we'll see how we get on. So I'm here tonight to talk on behalf of the NPA board. I'm a board member. I've been there for 3 years now, and I think we, generally speaking, at the NPA welcomed the right review and also the involvement with contractors. And I think from a very early stage on, we recognized and we supported the fact that there needed to be change. And as the NPA, we wanted to be an active participant in influencing this. And obviously, we've got the interests of our members and also the wider sector at heart, so that we can hopefully influence and also support the process that we are going through. We also believe that the attempt is sincere to get a coherent end-to-end system of representation and support on both a local and a national leadership level. Although with that comes its own challenges, because with the formation of ICSs, with PCNs, which wasn't really on the radar that much when the right review took place, obviously what comes out from the review steering group will need to take account of that and also take account of what's best for the contractors on ground level within the 3 different, let's call it cohorts, multiples, the 2 multiples and also independents. So there was a lot of recommendations, and I think the NPA could see merit in the vast majority of those. But also we felt that some of the key questions would hopefully be answered through the process that the review steering group has set up. And then that when we come to the recommendations that we vote on, hopefully that will encompass all of the discussions on a local and national level in order to shape the strategy for us going forward. And I think it is safe to say that the vision and the strategy, although we are working currently on a local level, I think is still a little bit lacking on a national level. We've got a 5-year contract, which we are more than halfway through now, one can argue. But I think it's really important that we set the strategy for a local and also a national level. We recognize that the investment needs to be on a local and also national level. And with that, of course, comes improved accountability and a request for transparency. We also think that equitable governance needs to be in place so that the independents and the multiples are fairly represented, and also that the local and national leadership structures from the new NHS should be represented. Now, Simon has already alluded to the formation of PCNs and ICSs. I also did a little bit earlier. So we need to allow a very distinctive voice. Obviously, I'm talking from NPA perspective, that the distinctive voice of the independents are heard and also listened to in order for us to achieve a local agenda based on a national NHS strategy. But we also need to be mindful that this needs to work for bigger and also for smaller organizations. It's really important for me that the sector develops a strategy on a local and also national level. And I do hope that through the set of voting, we will get a steer on what that could potentially look like, which will then, of course, set the negotiations starting on 2023 on the operating models, as Simon put it. At the moment, we are more clear on what the asks on an LPC level will be, because we can sort of see how the waters are starting to lie. For example, we talk about alignment to NHS structures and all of those type of things. But I think it's really important that we understand what the national and also the local plans will be and the roadmap will be before we actually start embarking on a road in order to shape the one and not the other. So it will be very important when we start looking at the voting that we don't just vote, for example, on LPC structures, but also what does the future negotiating committee look like? Community Pharmacy England, PSNC, call it what you want. And I do think that we should just be incredibly mindful that during this whole process of internal review, the world is moving on. You know, we've had COVID and all sorts of other challenges thrown at us. And whilst we are trying to focus on internal structures, we also need to be mindful that our customer needs and also our patient demands in the process will be changing. And of course, the success of this will depend on whether the sector is served equitably by the new committee and also that patients at the end and our customer, the NHS, get value for the money. Nick, I think I'll leave it there for now, and then hopefully we can explore a bit of those in some questions.
That's great, Jay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Simon. So I think what I've heard there is some really, really fundamental points, so, you know, which we'll try and tease out through some of the questions we've got over the next sort of half an hour or so. So, you know, we'll be exploring the difference between local and national. I've also heard words like transparency, agile, outcomes, duplication, which I think are really important words for us understanding the direction of travel. So, Simon, if I can direct the first question to you, if that's okay. So fundamentally, the reforms that we deliver or that we hope will be delivered, how can you see them increasing the global sum? Do you see them increasing a global sum at a national level, at a local level? What's you talked about contractor satisfaction and outcomes. So what's your vision for actually, you know, in England, I think satisfaction would come maybe with more pennies in the pocket. Maybe I'm being a bit crude. How do you see that developing through those structures where those revenue streams may come from? Thanks.
Well, I think that from in the current position that we're in, we've got as we know, a contractual framework with a fixed sum every year, 2.592 billion. We also have an annual review process built into that. And every year we go through a negotiating process whereby there is and we're going through one right at the minute, whereby we look at what it is that the NHS and the department want to insert into that contract, money of which of course has been already trailed through the annex of the original 2019 document. And we work on that to try and bake in the issues that contractors have with capacity and with costs. What I think a better negotiating outcome would be for us, two things. One is that we start to work closer with the Department of NHS England from the get-go, so that we don't have a mandate that's just dropped on our laps, and then we have this almost inevitable toing and froing negotiation process, but we have a more collaborative approach, working together to a final outcome. But secondly, that we have the resource at PSNC, which we do not have at the minute, in order to really drill down into some of the elements of the figures to be able to put across a more convincing case for additional funding. You know, there are the current contractual framework is based on efficiencies that the NHS are convinced are inside the dispensing process, which have not materialised. And so, on that basis, we are saying that we need to have more money in order to do more. It's as simple as that. So at the minute, we've got a discussion whereby we're trying to reduce the amount that's being inserted into the contractual framework because it is a fixed sum. A good outcome here would be to have an increased global sum, core sum, in order for us as a sector to do far more, which we have in parts already demonstrated the ability or potential to do.
That's great, Simon. So you see that the growth then being from a more national level of that contractor sum from what you described there.
So there will always, and this is where I think it's really interesting with the ICSs that Jay touched on and the local commissioning, because there will be clearly commissioning from ICS. We don't yet know how that's going to look. But what we do know is that there is no appetite within our customers, commissioning partners, for anything other than a single conversation with PSNC about the overall contractual framework. What then comes out of that at a local level, we've yet to see. But there is clearly going to be a need for better outcomes at national level, but equally, even more importantly, arguably, is to have a network of local representatives who are absolutely able to work collaboratively, closely with local commissioners to get the best at a local level too.
Thanks, Simon. So Jay, I'm going to draw you in on that question. National growth, but needing and requiring a local structure. Some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because listening at what we're trying to achieve, if I look at the success rate of what we've had recently in regional services which are being developed on a regional or a local level and then scaled up into more of a national service, I think that seems to be the going trend, rather than having a national contract which then gets imposed on all local providers. So for me, I think innovation actually sits locally, because the people working locally, they know the needs of the population. And I do think that the more closer integration with health and social care will actually give us more opportunity to work better together with other healthcare providers on a much local level. Now, that will of course open strategies on a local level in order to deliver the population health on that local level. How that complements and sits with a national contractual framework, I'm not quite sure, because it seems to me like the emphasis is moving away from, of course, the NHS will always be there as a national strategy, but it seems to me that they are focusing on population health rather than public health. Now, obviously, with COVID, public health is still important, but population health seems to be the trend at the moment, specifically around ICSs and PCN development. So I think the NPA's proposal, where we wanted to see a regional service development support hub, I think is very valid, which could help build these cases up, which of course will then give the, let's call it, ammunition for the new PSNC negotiating committee to go to the national body and say, look, we've piloted this on a regional level. These are the outcomes. We obviously need to gather all the data in order to build a sound case, and then almost create the data and the case studies for the national body to sit down eye to eye with the powers that be and say, right, this is obviously working in this part of the country. should there be a local need or national need for something similar elsewhere, let's just have it as a national service. And of course, that needs to come with additional funding, because you can't just say, right, well, that comes from existing funding, because the existing funding is what we are currently doing.
Thanks, Jay. So can I build on that just a little bit more then, and maybe throw that back to Simon? So we've talked very much, and I've heard you articulate about a strong national, and Jay's mentioned some stuff about local. So, but we've also talked about value for money and the need of the reduction in duplication. And we're sort of accepting that, some sort of reform is needed. The split of resource currently, you've also talked, Simon, about maybe that there's more resource needed at the centre potentially. So do you think the split between national and local in resource is about right? Or do you think that it needs to be shifted in a slightly different way? Because it feels as if there's lots going on everywhere. So, but the pot obviously is not ever lasting. So split between local and national?
So I will answer that question, but I just want to touch on Jay's point, because he's got a really good point about local innovation. I think that the bit about capturing local innovation and trying to get it to work nationally is a really important one, and one where, let's be honest, we are struggling. We've seen CPCS generated at pilot level. And in terms of the national rollout, it hasn't worked as well as it at should and could do. And I suppose it's how we get, and I don't have the answer, but how do we get local innovation piloted, accepted, understood by our customer as something that they want, and then how do we get it rolled out in a way that doesn't end up in a postcode lottery, but actually that we end up with a really good, effective service, especially for those services that will perhaps be relevant everywhere across the country. And I think that's something that we really do need to hold on to, and perhaps we'll come back to. In terms of the national and local, I would say that, and you'd say, well, of course you're going to say this, but I need more resource at the centre. I need more resource nationally, because I do think that if you are going to if you're going to negotiate a contract that is £2.592 billion a year currently, clearly we want more, then I need, and we need to have the health economists, we need to have the people who can crunch our data. I've got some fantastic data people, but they're utterly swamped. Example, right now, we're in the middle, or coming toward the end, I hope, of the year 3 negotiations of the contractual framework. But of course, we've got COVID costs analysis that's going on at the same time. And just having two things going on at the same time, as we found out during, of course, the pandemic, where everyone was struggling, I appreciate, but all of a sudden you start to realize that how hot you're running as an organization. And that means we're not being able to give contractors the best outcome that we want. So I think for me, yes, we need more at a national level, but in a fixed pot. And don't go back to my original terms of reference. This is about reorganizing representation and support for contractors without spending any more money. And that's my question about Jay's concept of the regional innovation hub. Fantastic idea, but where's the money going to come from if we are going to resource the centre for a national negotiation better? How do we have to therefore reduce some of the regional, local representation, or at least to rationalise it in some way. And that, I think, those are sort of some of the difficulties that the RSG and the consultants are grappling with at the minute, because that's a really difficult question to answer when, as we know, local work is so important to not just right now but to the future.
Thank you, Simon. So I think, thank you for a really honest answer, because I'm sure you get bombarded with these questions all the time. And it's really refreshing actually to hear you go, I'm negotiating a big contract, I need more resource at the centre, in a very clear and plain language. Yet, as you say, it also feels as if lots of other things are happening locally. If you look at the new representation we saw, the new parliamentary health bill, and the way in which ICAs are going to evolve, and potential devolution of funding within there. Do you think that would change your mind to representation, Simon? Or do you think that actually, if we were more efficient, we could grow the pot? If you could grow the pot, you could have the same percentage being taken, but a larger workforce for the negotiation, both nationally and locally?
Well, yes, but chicken and egg, isn't it? In order to grow the pot, I need the resource. And so, I think that, go back to David Wright's review, go back to some of the issues that he raised there. And I think that we've got things there that we need to address anyway, in terms of how we are structured and the impact that we have in our effectiveness at LPC and PSNC level. And then by solving those, it may well free up resource in order to do more with certainly from our perspective at the centre.
Anything additional about what we've just heard in the change of representation? The fact Simon needs more at the centre, but actually local innovation is the key to growing service. It does feel very chicken and egg, doesn't it, as you say? But Simon's been very honest and give us more at the centre, but innovation happens locally.
Nick, I think we can just take a pause and see what the statutory body is recognised in legislation here. And we know what that is. However, I think if PSNC changes their mandate and they get additional resources, in whichever way it looks, and I think we are talking very sort of blue sky thinking here now, but let's say for argument's sake that does happen and there's a complete restructure. I think with that, if the mandate changed, we also need to ask for additional accountability. And what would happen if then delivery does not take place, but that resource has already been put in centrally. So I do think that whilst we are in this design process, we need to also think about, if this happens, what then? Or if that doesn't happen, what then? Who's going to be held accountable? At the same time, we need to also say, what does good look like for contractors? Are we going to accept, let's say, just for argument's sake, thinking back, only 200 out of 400 MURs. I know it's dead in the water now, but I think I'll illustrate my point by that. Or will we try to get everyone to deliver to the maximum that they could? So I do think that chicken and egg, absolutely, but I don't think we can have the chicken first, because it might be baked and then come out of the oven burnt.
So I love that, Jay. So if I go back then to, so we've really kicked around that local and that national, and I just want to pull out, Simon, and maybe direct you a comment that Jay made earlier about the review steering group and seeing the whole process. So at the minute we seem as if very much we're seeing what the local difference may be, but how do you, what's the view from the centre about actually seeing the big picture, what a national reformed organisation looks like, as well as a locally changed system? Because it seems as if we're concentrating on reform at the local rather than the whole picture at the minute, and this does seem like a whole organisation restructure. Yeah, and it shouldn't seem like that, and it's a good point, Nick. And I think that I hope when I was sort of reflecting back on our original terms of reference, I made the point that this is about looking at PSNC and LPCs, and that David Wright has brought up a lot of the issues that reflect on both. Yes, we've talked a bit about duplication, which I guess is mainly focused on at a local level at LPCs, but he talked about transparency, he talked about governance, effectiveness of the negotiating process at a national level, and those are things that we at PSNC need to
need the RSG, the review steering group, to reflect upon and to provide answers to. So, there's a reason why I think a lot of colleagues and contractors think I'm somehow dodging the bullet here by not being part of this process. But you can see, I think, how it would look if I was somehow integrally involved in this, when I've got skin in the game. The organization's got skin in the game. So quite rightly, we need to, yes, of course, just like LPCs, we want to put our view forward, but I can't be seen to influence this process, because it's a process that hopefully will come out with some ideas about how PSNC and LPCs together can be restructured, changed, altered, improved, and how we work together as well. So, it's important to bear that in mind, as you say.
Thanks, Simon. So, Jay, how do you reckon the contractors would demonstrate support if we saw these proposals? What do you think? We've seen this. We've seen what the RSGs come up with. We're thinking maybe yes, maybe no. What do you think the contractors, the NPA members, would need to see?
Yeah. So I think first of all, the right review talk about the leadership bodies or the representative bodies as being strategically involved within the process. And I think that as an NPA member and also other NPA members, they would like to see that there's parity for NPA members, because at the moment the NPA is the voice of the independents, because we've got a lot of independent members and the vast majority are NPA members. So I think to start with, that our members would like to see parity. So for example, CCA, AIM, and also NPA, there needs to be parity of involvement on a grassroots level. My next thought, well, not my, the NPA's next thought is about the voting. In order for us to avoid block voting, and also in order to avoid overly influencing the voting, we are proposing a triple lock. So absolute majority of independents approve a principle, as well as an absolute majority of multiples approve it, and 2/3 of everyone casting the vote across the sector must approve it as well. And of course, it's important for that principle to be carried through all the way through the, let's call it the smaller votes before the big yes/no vote at the end. Because the last thing we want is to have a 48-52% split, because we know that no one is happy then, we don't want that situation within the sector. So for me, the voice of inclusion should also be the same, so that the parity and equity between the different contractors is really important to be remembered and recognized. And I just had a discussion with one of my members earlier today, saying that they feel that there is a lot of inequality at the moment. So for example, a big NHS contract for a single owner compared to another NHS contract landing in a big head office, the time and resource it takes up is considerably more. So we need to either have a national body that can help sort that out, and if not, we should have a membership organization that can do the brunt of that. But then that membership organization should have a clear voice within the new structure. And for me, it's really important that the members can see what the LPC structures will look like, as well as the national body as well, because the two will complement each other. And if you can't vote on the one, then you shouldn't be voting on the other. Or if you can't see how both would look like, what both could look like, then you shouldn't be voting on either of those, because ultimately they need to complement each other, because that will be the local plus the national strategy, voice and implementation of whatever the contract looks like in 2023. Does that sort of answer the question, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to throw to Simon for some thoughts on that. I'm conscious we've probably only got sort of 5-6 minutes left before wrap up. But so Jay's talked there, Simon, about contractor engagement, us contractors and independents, that we represent feeling engaged. So some equality between the trade organisations and things about triple locks. Understanding your comments about not wanting to influence process, but how do those ideas sound from a sort of pragmatic point of view? And again, I would also say, as well as you said in your opening gambit, some of the reasons for those are historic. However, it'd be great to have some thoughts on that, Simon.
I think that first of all, the NPA, of course, the NPA's got a voice. I mean, you know, it would be madness not to have the voice of the NPA involved in this process. I think what Jay's referring to is on the, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jay, but you're referring to the review steering group aspect of it. So what I would say, if I could be slightly controversial, is I think that boat sailed. I think that the RSG is what it is. It's not a decision-making body. It's a group of people that represent the sector. Whether you think they're entirely representative or not, they are representative of the sector in a way, and are there to produce and help steer the contract consultancy to come up with ideas. In doing that, in fulfilling that, they have got to talk to the NPA, of course they have, and other representative bodies, because the only way this is going to work, and this comes on to, again, I think your other point, Jay, is that we cannot have a proposal that is so divisive that even if we took your triple lock process, we ended up with some sort of, you know, potentially dangerous split in the sector. We need to come up with, they need to come up with a proposal which actually the sector as a whole nods to and goes, yeah, I can see how that's going to work. And they're only going to be able to do that if they talk to every part of the sector during the course of I guess, the next few months leading up to hopefully them coming up with that. So I do hope that you know, that's going to be the outcome. There was another point that you were going to ask me, but I'm also conscious that there's some questions poking up in the corner, and there was one about the size of the PSNC, and for that matter, the NPA's committee, because, you know, should we both be reduced? And I think that, you know, there is something about, I think, all of us looking inward sometimes and being reflective to see whether we can do things better, you know, and look to see whether there are ways that we can restructure and, you know, and get a better outcome for our members and our constituents. And I suppose the question I have for you is, has that something the NPA have considered?
You nicely switched, Simon. I'm very impressed. So yeah, the NPA is always in constant review of the structures in which it looks, and there is work going on at the minute. And I think the other part of that question, which is really interesting, is around again, almost picks up on the NPA view around local structures mirroring that of NHS organisations. So, you know, about LPCs mimicking maybe ICA structures, and that seems a sensible place maybe to start, which is the current position. So yes, under constant review. And yeah, what do you think about LPCs matching ICAs, Simon?
Well, I think that, you know, so as always, we are going to have the geographical challenge of trying to with our contractors across the different parts of the country being represented effectively. And I think that and certainly speaking to LPC colleagues about this and other similar sort of questions about trying to mirror other structures is, of course, other structures can change, as we know, but also that sometimes the local geography doesn't lend itself to sort of a mirroring type of activity, whether that's simply because of whether it's because of demography or whether it's because actually of the way that the country is laid out. So I think that potentially, but also you know, it's got its challenges too.
That's great, and I have been reliably informed as well, you'd be pleased to know, that the NPA has reduced its side by over a third in recent election cycles. So I'm pleased if you want to keep up, Simon, that would be great. So so I think it's been a fascinating conversation. I'd like to thank both Jay and Simon for being really open and honest. And Simon, I thank you. I don't think had a chance to put your point of view across as PSNC, because like you say, you're trying to stay arm's length from the process, but your thoughts and questions have been very insightful. And Jay, thank you as always for the way in which you presented those positions. It's been fantastic. So this is the final session of the first day of the NPA's annual conference. Earlier today, we had Minister Joe Churchill, chair of the all-party pharmacy group, Jackie Doyle-Price, updating the opening sessions. We had Lisa Simpson from NHS England about integration and community pharmacy, a session earlier this evening. Sessions are available to watch on the NPA website. A conference continues through Thursday, various sessions, so please join as much as you can. Lastly, just my thanks to the whole NPA team, to Jay and to Simon, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.